long-term memories, whatever they may be, the good or the positive, or the bad or the positive, they completely hold a place in our brain to where something random will always trigger it,
Yeah.
like you were talking about anxiety or depression or any other manic episodes that someone could potentially go through throughout life. It could be triggered by a long term, or could be triggered by something that could trigger a long term memory that will put you back into a dark place. Because I know I have before in the past. Recently I've been on a really good tear. I've been feeling really good about life, confident,
Yeah.
awesome. But in the past, there has been certain things that do bring you back to certain memories that you don't necessarily want to relive, but for some reason, it's been such a deep, impactful thing that it's been carried with you throughout the years.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you have something like that as well.
Oh, for me, and I don't know if this is a common occurrence for a lot of people, or if I'm just like a freakoid, or like what. But my good and bad memories, they're linked. Like typically, the memories that I have represent both. It'll spark a really good time in my life and a horrible time in my life from the same memory, from the same event. And for the most part, that's how my memories are. So it's really challenging for me to try to get into a headspace where something will remind me of, like for example, I'll be watching a football game, and something will happen, and that'll spark a really great memory that I have with my little brother, because football was really something that we shared and had a passion for, and that we really. But then when I start thinking about that, it inevitably, without doubt, the next one, he's not here anymore, and that triggers the memory of him passing, and it's forever linked. So I can't separate having a good memory of my little brother without going to the bad memory of losing him. And so it seems to be like that with all of my memories. What about you? Are yours linked like that? Because like I find it odd, but maybe normal, that you experience something that brings you so much joy, and then within seconds it's like, oh man, this is a crushing moment, and I don't even want to think about this. Like in the same span of like a minute and a half. I don't know.
Yeah, it's definitely linked. I feel like, because the reason I came up with the idea for this podcast, my friend passing away, and I do feel like, it almost every time we record an episode of Everything's Okay, I think about it because I think about where the show even stemmed from.
Right.
But I'm like thinking about memories the other day, like of us jumping off of a cliff into a waterbed or into a river. And then, of course, inevitably, you're right. That does lead back to, yeah, he's not here anymore, and leads back to the last time you spent with that person,
Right.
or all of these different things. So, yeah, it is very weird because, like, when I think about memories, say with my dad, it's one of those things where, like, there's all of these good things. I remember having new shoes for basketball games and taking pride in that because my dad took pride in his shoes, but then it inevitably turns back into a negative connotation or a negative story that, I have probably even forgiven him about, but just because that memory is still there and it still holds weight in my life. And that's the thing. I don't know how to alleviate that weight even after you've already forgiven someone for what they've done. But yeah, I mean, it's a one step in front of the other, like everything
Yeah.
else in life, where it leads into either a really good place or a really bad place.
Well, and a lot of times you will bury those memories, right? Like I say all the time. I think you and I have had this conversation numerous times, and me with Emily, and me with people that are close to me. I don't really remember anything prior to around 7 or 8 years old when my dad died. I
Hmm.
I buried it, and I'm sure they're there, right? I'm sure the memories are there. I'll recall a certain thing here or a certain thing there. But what I think is really going on, and this is typical too, guys. This is a normal occurrence when you put away those memories. You choose for whatever reason, pain or whatever, to not want to remember that. Your brain sometimes will distort the facts. It'll fill in gaps with stuff that may or may not be true. It might just be your brain trying to manifest a memory for you to get past a difficult time with something that may or may not have even occurred, or may have occurred in a much different way. And I'm fairly certain that a lot of my memories prior to my dad dying might be exactly that. Recalling something that was a happy moment for me, but not really sure if that was real or not. Am I putting something that I know was partly there and partly, and then making this memory out of these little pieces to somehow fill that gap? Maybe. I think that's a lot of what's going on prior to my dad dying, which is crazy because, that's 7, 8 years of my life, and to just go, nope, no, not, I don't remember. And it's weird, because the rest of my family can talk about it. Oh, yeah, you remember when we were 2 and we did this? Like, no, sure don't. I don't remember. And so that can be difficult too, right? Because it matters with your memories, because it does, whether you want them to or not, affect your other relationships in your life, family, friends, significant others, because it can spark good and bad things. And unfortunately, that can play a lot of turmoil, not just in a good way, but turmoil in a bad way, with relationships that you have in your life, right?
Yeah, most definitely. And I mean, would you say that's probably why you don't? Because I mean, you bring up stories about your brother all the time, but I mean, you rarely ever talk about your dad. So do you feel like that's probably partially the reason why? It's because you remember things, but even things that you think you remember, you think may or may not be skewed because of different things and traumas and stuff like that?
I think so. Every time I try to go back and think about why I don't remember a lot about my dad, or why I choose not to, I guess, is my theory on it is that death, what was my introduction into what would become a very tragic timeline in my lifetime, where I lose so many people. Death has become just like abnormally normal in my life, and that's the sparking point. That was the ignition that started it all. That ignited my fear of death, my hate of death, my not being able to deal with death or loss. So my theory is I just tried my very best to erase it, to just
Mm.
not remember it, so that I can deal with loss. And I guess my reasoning is if I forget the first loss, the trauma that caused, maybe it can ease the rest of the loss that I do remember. So that's my theory on it. I don't know, but that's what I think it is, because you're right. I can remember all the way back yesterday, like telling you things about Joe when I was 8 and he was a baby. And that's the same time period when my dad was still alive, but I couldn't tell you anything about how my dad interacted with Joe. Was there an interaction there? I don't know. I legitimately don't remember any of that. So I don't know. I'm
Yeah.
curious though, if anybody's out there listening, if you have an explanation, or like what that may or may not be, hit us up. 'Cause
Yes,
I'm curious.
please.
I'm
Yeah,
curious.
it is very interesting too because like when you're remembering things with people who are still alive, like you never think, yeah, and they're still alive. But
Right.
when you're remembering people or remembering instances with people who have passed on, it always inevitably ends up to the point of, yeah, they've passed on, right? And
Exactly.
then it becomes a sadder, more somber moment. But I mean, for example, the first time I ever had to deal with death was I was 12, I think, in my sixth grade. It was my grandpa. I hadn't seen him in probably 4 years, 5 years. So I mean, between the age of like 7 to 12, like that's or 8 to 12, however long that's a pretty substantial amount of time in a very young pubescent
Yeah,
person, you know?
without
I mean,
doubt.
that's a lot of memories that are developing very, rapidly. And while you're starting to actually garner real memories that you will eventually carry with you the whole life. But I remember there was this place called Guntown Mountain in Kentucky where you literally had to ride like one of those snow lifts or and ski lifts to get up to
Yeah.
the town. And it was this old Western reenactment town basically that he would take me to like every summer. So it's things like that that I miss, but then of course it inevitably leads to yes, and then he passed on, and then also what is always so sad for me, especially with like younger years, because I remember how close I was with my grandfather. Like, but the last time I talked to him or had any interaction with him was like at this age of 7 or 8, like I said. But like, I don't remember his voice. Like, that's always a thing that I get terrified about. Like, after people pass on, you're not gonna remember their voice unless you have like voice recordings of them, obviously.
Right.
So that's always a big thing for me. I always wish there was like when that time comes, and our technology is ever evolving every single day, but when that time comes, I think, not to get morbid, I would want to record like a final message for my loved ones that
Mm,
I'm leaving
mm.
behind so that they can always have it, know that I'm happy, know that I'm okay, and know that they could continue chasing their dreams so that they know this last message that I can send to them is positive instead of the last message is negative or the last thing you remember is death. So yeah, it's very weird.
It really is.